My name is Daniel, and I once considered myself a fortunate man. I had a stable job as a graphic designer, a charming house nestled in a quiet neighborhood, and a wife who, at least I thought, loved me as deeply as I loved her. Her name was Sarah, and she was the light of my life. With her long, flowing hair and bright smile, she had a warmth that could melt even the coldest of days. We had built a life together filled with laughter, shared dreams, and countless memories. Our weekends were spent exploring local markets, hiking through the woods, or simply enjoying the serenity of our backyard, where we had planted a small vegetable garden. We often reminisced about our early days, when we were young and carefree, filled with hope and ambition. I remembered the first time I saw her at a mutual friend's party. She wore a red dress that accentuated her figure, and her laughter rang out like music. I was drawn to her instantly, and after a few awkward attempts at conversation, I managed to ask her out. That night marked the beginning of a love story that I thought would last forever. But now, as I sit on the porch of our home, I can feel the shadows creeping in. The sun sets beautifully over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the world, yet it feels as though darkness is closing in on me. The idyllic life we had built together feels like a distant memory. It was a Friday afternoon when I first noticed something off about Sarah. She had been more distant than usual, often lost in thought or distracted by her phone. I brushed it off as work stress. After all, she was a dedicated nurse, often working long hours and dealing with difficult patients. I wanted to be understanding, to be the supportive husband she needed. But as the days turned into weeks, my instincts began to nag at me. One day, I decided to surprise her by coming home early. I envisioned us enjoying a quiet evening together, perhaps cooking dinner and watching a movie. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was already parked at home. The sight filled me with warmth and anticipation. Little did I know, I was walking into a nightmare. As I entered the house, I was greeted by an unusual silence. I called out her name, but no response came. My heart raced as I made my way to the back patio, where we often spent our evenings. What I saw shattered my world into a million pieces. There she was, sitting on the edge of our deck, laughing and flirting with a man I had never seen before, a fisherman, by the looks of his weathered skin and casual attire. The moment felt surreal, as if I were watching a scene from a movie rather than living it. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. They were sharing a bottle of wine, their laughter echoing into the air like a haunting melody. I felt as if I had been punched in the gut, the air around me growing heavy with the weight of betrayal. How could she? The questions raced through my mind, each one more painful than the last. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but I was paralyzed by disbelief. Instead, I took a step back, retreating into the shadows of our home. My heart pounded as I fought back tears, struggling to comprehend the reality of what I had just witnessed. The woman I had loved and trusted was betraying me, sharing intimate moments with another man. As I stood there, the waves of anger and confusion washed over me. The idyllic life we had built together began to crumble, and with it, the trust that had once anchored our relationship. I felt as if I were drowning, caught in a tide of emotions that threatened to pull me under. I needed to confront her, to demand answers, but a darker thought began to take root in my mind. What if I could turn the tables? What if I could ensure she faced the consequences of her actions? The idea of poetic justice began to blossom, and with it, a plan started to form. I would make her feel the weight of her betrayal just as I had felt it. I would ensure she got caught in her own net. The days that followed that fateful Friday were a blur of confusion and anguish. I felt as if I were living in a fog, moving through life as if I were merely a spectator in my own story. I went to work, sat at my desk, and pretended to focus on my projects, but my mind was consumed by thoughts of Sarah and the fisherman. Each time I closed my eyes, I could see them together, his rugged hands brushing against her skin, their laughter mingling in the air like a cruel mockery of the love we once shared. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The betrayal gnawed at me, an insatiable hunger that left me feeling hollow. I found myself replaying the moment I had witnessed over and over again, dissecting every detail, trying to understand how I had missed the signs. Had she been acting differently? Had I been blind to her infidelity? My heart ached, a constant reminder of the love I had thought was unbreakable. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring blankly at the television, I heard the sound of the front door opening. My heart raced as Sarah walked in, her face lighting up with a smile that felt so foreign to me now. She was wearing that same red dress from our early days, the one that had once made my heart skip a beat. But now it only filled me with rage. I forced myself to maintain a calm demeanor as she approached me. "Hey babe, you're home early," she exclaimed, her voice cheerful and oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Yeah, just thought I'd surprise you," I replied, my voice flat. I wanted to scream at her to demand answers, but I held back. I needed to gather my thoughts to plan my next move. Over the next few days, I watched her closely, searching for any hint of guilt or remorse. But she seemed carefree, living her life as if nothing had changed. It infuriated me. How could she act like everything was normal when I was falling apart inside? That's when I knew I had to confront her, on my terms when I was ready. The idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind, and I found myself becoming consumed by it. I started to think about how I could turn her own actions against her. The more I thought about it, the more I felt a sense of clarity. I didn't want to hurt her in a way that would destroy me too. I wanted her to understand the pain she had caused. I began to devise a plan, one that would be both poetic and just. I needed to gather evidence, something tangible that would prove her infidelity beyond a shadow of a doubt. I considered following her, but the thought of lurking in the shadows made my skin crawl. Instead, I decided to enlist the help of a friend, Mark, a fellow graphic designer who had a knack for technology. One evening, I invited Mark over under the pretense of wanting to hang out. As we cracked open a couple of beers, I casually mentioned my suspicions about Sarah. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, and he offered to help me set up a discreet way to monitor her activities. Within days, we had devised a plan. Mark suggested using a hidden camera outside our home, aimed at the back patio where I had first seen Sarah with the fisherman. I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. This was it. I was about to take control of my life again. It was a necessary step to ensure that I would have evidence of her betrayal, something that would force her to confront the reality of her actions. As I set up the camera with Mark, I felt a sense of power rising within me. I was no longer the hapless husband left in the dark. I was now an architect of my own justice. Yet beneath that newfound strength, a voice whispered doubts in my mind. Was I becoming the villain in my story? Was revenge worth the potential fallout? Despite my inner turmoil, I pressed on. I told myself that this was about self-preservation, about reclaiming my dignity. I needed to know the truth, and I was prepared to confront Sarah with the evidence in hand. The camera was discreetly hidden, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I turned it on for the first time. I knew I had to wait for the right moment to allow Sarah to slip up. I watched the footage each night, my heart racing as I scanned for any sign of her infidelity. Each day I waited felt like an eternity, but I was determined to see this through. And then one sunny afternoon, as I sat at my desk reviewing the footage, I saw it. Sarah, laughing and playful, stepped onto the patio, and there he was, the fisherman. My heart sank, but a dark satisfaction washed over me. This was the evidence I needed. Now all I had to do was wait for the right moment to confront her. I would make her face the consequences of her actions, and she would get caught in her own net. The day of confrontation loomed over me like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. I had spent countless nights replaying the footage in my mind, each scene a reminder of Sarah's betrayal. The laughter, the intimacy, they were daggers, driving deeper into my heart with every passing moment. I felt a mix of dread and anticipation as I prepared for what would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. I decided to confront Sarah on a Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet, the sun streaming in through the windows, casting warm patches of light across the living room. I could hear the distant sounds of children playing outside, laughter echoing through the air. It felt surreal. knowing that I was about to shatter the illusion of our happy home. As I paced back and forth in the living room, my thoughts raced. I needed to remain calm, collected. I couldn't let her see how deeply this affected me. I wanted her to understand the gravity of her actions, to feel the weight of the betrayal she had inflicted upon me. When Sarah finally came home, she was in a cheerful mood, her face lit up with that same smile that had once captivated me. She had just finished a shift at the hospital and was still wearing her scrubs. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by her usual exuberance. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" she asked, her voice bright. "Can we talk?" I replied, my tone flat. Her smile faltered, and I could see the uncertainty creeping into her expression. "Sure, what's up?" I gestured toward the couch, and she sat down, her posture shifting as she sensed the seriousness of the moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Sarah, I saw something that I need to talk to you about," I began, my voice steady. "Something that's been eating away at me." "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. I paused, feeling the weight of the words I was about to unleash. "I saw you with him, the fisherman." Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks as she processed my words. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "I have proof," I said, my heart racing as I reached for my phone. I opened the video file and pressed play, the sound of their laughter filling the room. As the footage played, I watched her expression shift from confusion to horror. She covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide as she saw herself and the fisherman together, sharing moments that were supposed to be reserved for us. "Daniel, I can explain," she cried, panic rising in her voice. "Explain what? How you betrayed me, how you threw away everything we built together." I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. "You think this is just going to disappear? You think I'm going to pretend I didn't see this?" She stood up, her face flushed with a mixture of fear and shame. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "A mistake?" I echoed, disbelief flooding my veins. "You call this a mistake? You were laughing, flirting with him like I didn't even exist. How could you do this to me?" "I was lonely," she exclaimed, her voice rising in desperation. "You've been so consumed with work, and I felt neglected. I didn't know how to handle it." Her words struck a chord, and I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Yes, I had been busy, pouring my energy into my career, but that didn't justify her actions. "So, you thought cheating was the answer? You thought throwing away our marriage was the solution?" "I'm sorry," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." Hearing her say that felt like a slap in the face. Love, how could she claim to love me while being with another man? I felt betrayed, my self-esteem crumbling as I realized the depth of her deception. "Love," I said, my voice low and controlled. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have sought comfort in someone else's arms. You would have come to me, talked to me about how you felt. I know I—" "No," she sobbed, her voice wavering. "I messed up, Daniel. Please just give me a chance to make it right." I shook my head, the anger boiling inside me. "You had your chance, Sarah. You made your choice. And now I need to make mine." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a mixture of fear and regret. I realized that this confrontation was not just about her betrayal. It was about me reclaiming my power. I had been the one left in the dark, but now I was ready to take control. I didn't know what the future held, but I was certain of one thing. I would ensure that Sarah faced the consequences of her actions. I would make her feel the weight of betrayal just as I had felt it. With that thought in mind, I turned away from her, the camera footage still playing in my mind. I was done being the victim. It was time for poetic justice to unfold. In the aftermath of that explosive confrontation, I felt a mixture of anger and relief wash over me. I had finally confronted Sarah, forced her to face the harsh reality of her choices. But as she stood there, tears streaming down her face, begging for forgiveness, I felt something shift within me. The pain was still fresh, but alongside it was a burgeoning resolve. I would not be the one left broken in the wake of her betrayal. No, I would make sure she understood the full weight of her actions. As I sat in my office, the remnants of our argument echoing in my mind, I began to refine my plan for revenge. I had spent countless hours thinking about how to confront Sarah with the evidence of her infidelity, but now I knew I needed to take it a step further. I wanted her to experience the consequences of her actions, to feel the same betrayal that had torn me apart. I picked up my phone and called Mark. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and inviting. "Hey man, how's it going?" "Not great," I replied, my voice steady but laced with a hint of urgency. "I need your help with something." "What's up?" he asked, sensing the gravity in my tone. "I have the footage of Sarah with the fisherman and I want to make sure she gets caught in her own net. I need your help to set something up," I explained, my mind racing with ideas. Mark listened intently as I laid out my plan. "I want to create a situation where Sarah will be forced to confront her choices in front of the people she cares about. I want her to feel the humiliation of being exposed for what she's done." "Dude, that sounds intense," Mark said, a hint of concern creeping into his voice. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I paused, contemplating his question. Did I want to go through with it? Part of me felt vindicated just thinking about it, but another part of me was wary of the potential fallout. "I need to make her understand," I finally said. "I need her to feel what I felt." Mark agreed to help me, and we began brainstorming the details of my plan. I envisioned a gathering, a small dinner party with a few close friends. I would invite Sarah, and unbeknownst to her, I would also invite the fisherman. The idea was to create an environment where Sarah would have to face the reality of her actions, surrounded by people who loved and supported me. It would be a way to expose her betrayal, to force her to confront the consequences of her infidelity. Over the next few days, I meticulously planned every detail. I reached out to a few friends, carefully selecting those who would be supportive of me and who could help create the right atmosphere. I wanted to ensure that the evening would be memorable, one that would leave a lasting impression on Sarah and the others present. As I prepared for the dinner, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. I was excited about the prospect of finally taking control of the narrative, but I was also aware of the potential fallout. What if things went too far? What if Sarah became defensive or angry? I pushed those thoughts aside, reminding myself that this was about justice, about reclaiming my dignity. The night of the dinner arrived, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I set everything up. The dining table was beautifully arranged, adorned with candles and elegant dinnerware. I took a moment to appreciate the effort I had put into creating a pleasant atmosphere, but beneath that facade lay the storm brewing within me. When Sarah arrived, she was dressed elegantly, a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. She greeted me with a smile, but I could see the tension in her eyes. I knew she sensed that something was off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. I played the part of the gracious host, welcoming our friends as they arrived, all while keeping my composure. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and conversation. I watched as Sarah engaged with our friends, her laughter ringing out like a bittersweet reminder of the love we once shared. But I couldn't forget the betrayal. It loomed large in my mind, a shadow that darkened everything. Finally, when the time felt right, I decided to make my move. I stood up, raising my glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, my voice steady. "To love and trust, and to the bonds that hold us together." Everyone raised their glasses, and I caught Sarah's eye. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of apprehension in her gaze, but I pressed on. But sometimes those bonds can be tested in ways we never expect. I paused, letting my words linger in the air. The room fell silent, and I could feel the tension building. "I think it's important to acknowledge when those bonds are broken. Sarah, I have something I need to show you." I reached for my phone, my heart racing. I had set up the projector earlier in the evening, and now it was time to reveal the truth. I clicked a button, and the footage of Sarah and the fisherman flickered to life on the wall. Gasps filled the room as the laughter and intimacy played out before our friends. Sarah's face went pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice shaking. "This is you, Sarah," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is what you chose. This is how you betrayed me." The room was filled with a mix of shock and sympathy. I could see the realization dawning on our friends' faces as they processed what they were witnessing. Sarah stood frozen, her hands trembling as she took in the reality of her actions. "I can explain," she cried, her voice rising in desperation. "This isn't what it looks like." But it was too late for explanations. The truth was laid bare before everyone, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. I had ensured that she would face the consequences of her actions, that she would get caught in her own net. As the footage played on, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had taken control of the narrative, and now it was time for Sarah to confront the reality of her choices. The room was thick with tension, every eye glued to the screen as the footage played on. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I watched Sarah's face contort from shock to horror. The laughter from the video echoed painfully in my ears, a cruel reminder of the intimate moments she had shared with another man. My heart raced, a mix of vindication and sorrow coursing through me. I had orchestrated this moment, and yet the reality of it felt heavy. "Daniel, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice shaking. "You have to believe me, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness." I shook my head, feeling the anger rising within me again. "A moment of weakness, you call this a mistake?" I gestured toward the screen where she and the fisherman were caught in a moment of intimacy. "This was a choice, Sarah. You chose to betray me, to betray us." Our friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. Some wore expressions of sympathy, while others looked on in disbelief. I could see Mark in the corner, his face a mixture of concern and support. He had helped me set this all up, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward him for standing by me. "Daniel, I love you," Sarah cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was confused and I didn't know how to reach out. I thought I could fix things on my own." "Fix things?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my voice. "By sleeping with someone else. You didn't even try to talk to me. You didn't even consider the love we had built together." The footage finally came to an end, and I clicked the projector off, plunging the room into silence. I could hear Sarah's ragged breaths as she tried to compose herself, but the damning evidence was undeniable. "I need some air," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned and rushed out of the room, leaving me standing there, the weight of my actions hanging in the air. As soon as she left, our friends began to murmur amongst themselves. I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of sympathy and concern. Mark approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Daniel, are you okay?" "Am I okay?" I replied, my voice tinged with bitterness. "I just exposed my wife for cheating on me in front of our friends. How do you think I feel?" "I know this is tough, but you did what you needed to do," Mark said gently. "You took control of the situation. You had to make her understand." I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. I had wanted justice, a sense of closure, but now I was left with a hollow ache. I had forced Sarah to confront her betrayal, but at what cost? As the evening wore on, our friends began to leave, offering me words of support and sympathy. I appreciated their concern, but I felt a deep sense of isolation. The laughter and warmth that had filled the room earlier felt like a distant memory. I was left standing in the aftermath of my own making. Eventually, it was just Mark and me. He leaned against the wall, watching me with a knowing expression. "You did what you thought was right," he said quietly. "But you need to think about what you want now." "What I want?" I echoed, feeling a mix of confusion and anger. "What I want is to not feel like this." I wanted her to understand, to feel the pain I felt. But now I'm not sure if I got what I wanted. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Revenge can be a double-edged sword. You wanted justice, but it's important to remember that it doesn't always bring the closure we hope for." His words struck a chord within me. I had been so focused on making Sarah face the consequences of her actions that I hadn't considered the emotional toll it would take on both of us. I had wanted to reclaim my power, but now I was left with uncertainty. "I need to talk to her," I finally said, determination flooding back into my voice. "I need to hear her side, to understand why she did this." Mark nodded, his expression supportive. "That's a good idea. Just be prepared for whatever she has to say." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I knew I had to confront the aftermath of my actions, and that meant facing Sarah once more. I needed to find out if there was any chance of salvaging what we had left, or if it was truly over. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face as I searched for Sarah. I found her sitting on the porch swing, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. The sight tore at my heart, a reminder of the love we once shared. "Sarah," I said softly, approaching her cautiously. She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Daniel. I was lost and I made terrible choices. I never wanted to hurt you." I sat down beside her, the weight of my anger beginning to dissipate. "I know you're hurting and I'm hurting too, but we need to talk about what happened. I need to understand why you turned to him." She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I felt so alone. You were always working and I felt like I was losing you. I thought I could find comfort in someone else, that it would help me cope. I was wrong and I'm so sorry." I listened to her words, searching for any hint of sincerity. "But you didn't even try to come to me. You didn't talk to me about how you felt." "I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was scared. I thought I could handle it on my own. I never thought it would go this far." As I listened to her, I realized that while her actions were unforgivable, there was a part of me that still cared for her. The love we had built together was not entirely gone. It was buried beneath the pain and betrayal, but it was still there, flickering like a dying flame. "Sarah, I can't pretend that this didn't happen. You broke my trust, and it's going to take time for me to process everything," I said, my voice steady. "But I want to understand. I want to know if there's a way for us to move forward." She reached for my hand, her grip trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, Daniel. I love you and I'm willing to fight for us." In that moment, I realized that while I had sought revenge, what I truly wanted was closure. I wanted to rebuild what had been lost, to find a way to move forward together, but it would take time and effort from both of us. The path ahead was uncertain, but as I sat there with Sarah, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The days that followed our confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions. Sarah and I found ourselves navigating uncharted waters, attempting to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy. Each conversation was laced with tension, each moment fraught with reminders of the betrayal. But as we talked, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had once filled my life with joy and laughter. We set aside time each week to sit down and communicate openly about our feelings. It was during one of those conversations that I realized how deeply Sarah had been affected by her actions. She spoke of her loneliness, the feelings of neglect, and how they had spiraled into a moment of desperation. I listened, trying to understand her perspective while grappling with my own pain. "I never wanted to hurt you, Daniel," she said one evening, her voice trembling as she looked into my eyes. "I was lost, and I made the worst decision of my life. I thought I could find solace in someone else, but all I found was regret." As I watched her, I felt the weight of my anger begin to lift. It was hard to believe that the woman I had loved could make such a terrible choice, but I also recognized that we were both flawed individuals trying to navigate the complexities of life together. "I understand that you were feeling alone," I replied, my voice steady. "But that doesn't excuse what you did. We need to work on our communication if we're going to move forward. I can't promise that it will be easy, but I want to try." We began to attend couples therapy, a decision that felt both daunting and hopeful. In those sessions, we unpacked our feelings and learned healthier ways to communicate. It was a slow process, but each small step felt like a victory. We began to rebuild the foundations of our relationship, brick by brick. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed changes in both of us. Sarah was committed to proving her love and loyalty. She started to prioritize our relationship, making efforts to connect with me in ways she hadn't before. We explored new hobbies together, went on weekend trips, and even revisited the places that held special memories for us. But despite the progress, the scars of betrayal remained. There were moments when I would catch myself feeling insecure or questioning her loyalty. It was a constant battle between wanting to trust her and the lingering fear of being hurt again. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to her. "Do you think we can ever fully move past this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her gaze focused on the horizon. "I believe we can, but it's going to take time. We both need to be patient with each other. I'll always regret my choices, but I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." I nodded, feeling a sense of hope blossoming within me. Perhaps there was a path forward, a way to emerge from the darkness of betrayal into the light of renewed trust and love. Months passed, and slowly the wounds began to heal. I found myself laughing more freely, enjoying our time together without the constant shadow of doubt hanging over us. I realized that while the past would always be a part of our story, it didn't have to define our future. One evening, as we cuddled on the couch, I turned to her and smiled. "I think we're going to be okay, Sarah. It's not going to be easy, but I believe we can make it through this together." She smiled back, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I promise I won't let you down again." It was a promise that would take time to fully trust, but I felt a glimmer of hope. We were both learning, both growing, and both committed to making our relationship stronger than it had ever been before. As I reflected on the journey we had taken, I realized that revenge had not brought me the closure I sought. Instead, it was the willingness to confront our demons together that had opened the door to healing. I had wanted poetic justice, but what I found was something far more valuable: understanding, forgiveness, and the chance to rebuild a love that had once felt lost. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about the strength to face the truth and the courage to move forward. Sarah and I were learning to navigate the complexities of our relationship, and while the road ahead would be challenging, we were committed to walking it together, hand in hand, with a renewed sense of purpose. I embraced the journey ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. Together, we would rise above the shadows of the past and forge a brighter future, one built on trust, love, and resilience. And in that moment, I knew we would be okay.